After killing the ant, the system notification confirmed his victory and signaled his level up. However, before he could fully process it, Baek Yoon-ho's urgent voice rang out, shouting that Hunter Cha Hai-in was in critical condition. Jin-Woo immediately realized he had spent too much time dealing with the ant and needed to find a healer fast. Shadow exchange wouldn't work, as the cooldown hadn't reset, and he had never attempted to travel with another person before. Even if they flew on Kaisel's back, Hunter Cha wouldn't last long. He quickly considered whether any healers from the Blade Guild were still alive, but even if there were, they wouldn't be able to arrive in time. He needed another solution. Then an idea struck him. Without hesitation, Jin-Woo turned to the videographer and ordered him to turn off the camera for a moment. The man hesitated, clearly confused, but Jin-Woo's expression darkened as he warned him to hurry up or he would break it. Realizing the seriousness of the request, the videographer quickly removed the camera from his head, though he still didn't understand why. Wasting no time, Jin-Woo commanded his shadows to search for the corpse of Hunter Min Byung-gu, a top-ranked healer. Soon, one of the higher orcs returned, carrying the fallen hunter's body. As Jin-Woo took in the sight, doubt crept in as he wondered if shadow extraction would even work on a body in such a condition. At that moment, a system notification appeared, confirming that shadow extraction was possible. Relief washed over him. This was his last hope. Without hesitation, he gave the command. Arise. Nothing happened. The extraction had failed. Frowning, he tried again. Arise. Yet again, there was no response. Confusion set in. With his level, he could easily extract nearly any shadow, so why was it failing? Then, he understood Min Byung-gu's soul was resisting. Jin-Woo clenched his fists. He never liked the idea of forcing someone to join his army, but right now, he had no choice. The living must live. For the third and final time, he commanded, Arise. This time, darkness swirled around the fallen hunter's body. As the transformation began, Baek Yoon-ho stepped closer, placing a hand on Jin-Woo's shoulder and asking in a quiet, uncertain voice what exactly he was doing. Then, a realization struck him. Jin-Woo wasn't just a mage or a summoner, he was something far more terrifying. He had the ability to control the dead. The other hunters watched in stunned silence, unable to comprehend what they were witnessing. The shadow he retrieved from Hunter Min Byung-gu approached Hunter Cha Hai-in. It instinctively used its healing powers to treat her wounds. Baek Yoon-ho, the head of the White Tiger Guild, watched in shock as his recently deceased friend, now a shadow, wordlessly began healing the huntress. Jin-Woo observed the shadow's actions and murmured that he was starting to understand what kind of person Hunter Min Byung-gu had been in life. Without any command, the shadow had immediately rushed to heal someone in need, showing kindness and compassion even in death. However, Baek Yoon-ho, his face grim, shook his head and muttered that this thing wasn't the man he had known. Jin-Woo acknowledged his words, agreeing that he was right. Meanwhile, the videographer, who had turned off his camera at Jin-Woo's insistence, stood frozen, struggling to comprehend what he had just witnessed. The idea of summoning the dead was unheard of, and now he understood why Jin-Woo didn't want this power broadcast to the world. Some of the observing hunters began to realize the terrifying nature of Jin-Woo's abilities. The stronger his opponent, the faster his own power seemed to grow. It was an ability unlike anything they had ever seen. Baek Yoon-ho, sensing the implications, admitted that Jin-Woo would face countless battles in the future, and that having a powerful healer at his side would be invaluable. However, he also reminded Jin-Woo that Min Byung-gu had never liked combat. With a heavy heart, he pleaded with Jin-Woo not to force him into something that would bring him pain. Jin-Woo considered his words carefully, then, with a deep sigh, made his decision. He shrugged off Baek Yoon-ho's grip and reminded him that this was the second time he had grabbed his shoulder, once as an order, and now as a sincere request. Jin-Woo admitted that he had similar thoughts himself, and without hesitation, cancelled the summoning. The shadow of Min Byung-gu turned to Baek Yoon-ho one last time, offering him a warm, familiar smile before disappearing. A heavy silence fell over the cave, unlike anything that had ever existed there before. The hunters stood in stunned stillness, absorbing everything that had just happened. A short while later, the group began their retreat from the cave. A helicopter hovered above, ready to extract them. As the hunters made their way toward it, Jin-Woo stopped and told them to leave. Without him, he still had unfinished business. Baek Yoon-ho's expression hardened as he realized that the battle wasn't over. Jin-Woo simply stated that he would clear the way and take care of the remaining ants. Without another word, he summoned his shadow dragon, Kaiser. As he climbed onto its back, he turned to Baek Yoon-ho with a confident smirk. "See you later," he said, before soaring into the sky. Kaiser's massive wings sliced through the air, and as Jin-Woo advanced, the ants that stood in his way were mercilessly cut down. Meanwhile, aboard one of the Japanese Association's cruisers, the hunters from Japan anxiously discussed the situation. One of them muttered that Ant is a terrifying monster, something beyond their comprehension. They had yet to see him in action, but the brutal way their leader, Goto Ryuji, had been killed left them shaken. He insisted that they had no chance of winning against such a force, and that this entire raid was doomed to fail. Another man standing nearby dismissed his fears and reassured him that the Jeju Island raid had officially ended. The first hunter refused to believe it, but soon confirmation came through from the Korean headquarters. The man then reflected on a past conversation with Goto Ryuji, who had once admitted that Korea seemed to have a hunter who might even be stronger than himself. Suddenly, alarms blared. The staff reported that the remaining ants were fleeing. The cruisers began preparing for evacuation, but on Jeju Island, the battle still raged on. Jin-Woo continued his relentless extermination of the remaining ants. As he fought, he realized something. By destroying the unhatched eggs, he was still gaining experience. This was an unexpected stroke of luck. Opening his inventory, he suddenly remembered an item he had obtained long ago, a sword from the demonic castle. He had completely forgotten about it. As he pulled it out, he marveled at its design and power. With a single swing, a massive electric wave erupted from the blade, tearing through everything in its path. He stood in awe, wondering how he could have let such a powerful weapon sit untouched in his inventory for so long. Deciding to use it to eliminate the remaining eggs, he set to work, cutting them down with ruthless efficiency. Meanwhile, across the ocean, the director of the Hunter Management Bureau in the United States was watching a recorded broadcast. As the footage played, he realized that morning had arrived without him noticing. A man burst into his office, and they began discussing Jin-Woo. The director remarked that a hunter who could summon hundreds of souls was an incredibly valuable asset. Not taking advantage of his abilities would be a massive waste. The other man agreed, adding that he had also heard of a high-profile case within the bureau, the Sung El-Hwan case. This was the same prisoner captured by Hunter James when he cleared an orange-ranked dungeon in the eastern United States. The bureau had struggled to determine whether Sung El-Hwan was a monster or a human, but after an extensive investigation, they discovered that he was actually a Korean hunter, and more importantly, Sung Jin-Woo's father. The conversation shifted to international politics. Other nations were still unaware of Jin-Woo's existence, and the US saw this as an opportunity. If they could secure an alliance with both Jin-Woo and Sung El-Hwan, South Korea would be indebted to them. However, the case of Hwang Dong-soo was a different matter. While Korea was an ally, the US had to be careful. Appropriating two S-rank hunters at once might make it seem as if they were turning their backs on their allies. The other man suggested that if they could arrange a deal, it would be beneficial. Back on Jeju Island, Jin-Woo's level had risen once again, reaching the milestone of level 100. As he approached a powerful ant he had just slain, he sensed an overwhelming aura radiating from it. Without hesitation, he used shadow extraction. But nothing happened. Instead, darkness began to spread around him, swallowing everything. For a brief moment, he thought he had failed. Then, out of nowhere, a figure emerged from the shadows. A new notification flashed before him. Shadow extraction successful. Relief washed over him. He had feared he wouldn't be able to retrieve it. Before him, a shadow soldier knelt, emanating an overwhelming presence. It wasn't just any shadow, it was a general rank shadow. The ant had become part of his army, a powerful new force under his command. Now, it was the Queen's turn to be resurrected. However, before Jin-Woo could proceed, the shadow ant suddenly spoke, addressing him with the words,
"My king, please give me a name."
Jin-Woo was momentarily surprised, just like all shadow warriors. This one had absolute loyalty towards him. Yet, what intrigued him more was how the ant had retained the ability to speak. He wondered how it had learned to communicate, but the ant simply replied,
"I always could."
Jin-Woo quickly realized that this wasn't something completely new. After all, Iron had been human before becoming a shadow, and Min Byung-goo's shadow had also shown traces of its past self. The real difference wasn't in their origins, but in their rank. He began to ponder if his other shadows increased in rank. Would they also gain the ability to speak? Turning his attention back to the ant, Jin-Woo asked how it could remain so loyal, despite him being the one who had killed it. Yet, the ant responded without hesitation.
"I had not been killed, but resurrected by the king's power. My soul now overflows with joy, and from this day forward, I will follow my king forever."
Bowing deeply once more, it repeated its request for a name.
"Please give me a name."
Jin-Woo hesitated. Calling it ant or bug didn't feel right. He searched for something more meaningful, and then suddenly a name came to mind. He recalled a famous writer who had gained recognition for a novel about ants, and in that instant he decided Baru. The moment he bestowed the name, Baru lowered his head in gratitude, acknowledging his king's will. Now, Jin-Woo turned his focus to the Ant Queen. Using shadow extraction, he awakened her soul, and as she rose, he noticed that she too had the rank of general. However, before he could fully grasp her capabilities, something strange began to happen. The remaining ants on the island started acting oddly, as if the connection binding them had suddenly weakened. Confused, Jin-Woo turned to Baru and demanded an explanation. Baru calmly informed him that the ability to control the Ant Legion belonged solely to the Queen. As long as she existed, the command over the entire swarm would return to her. Jin-Woo frowned despite her high rank. The Queen didn't seem to possess much mana. He questioned why that was, and Baru provided the answer.
Most of her mana had been dedicated to reproduction. Without a physical body, she could no longer lay eggs, rendering her unfit for battle.
Realizing that he didn't need 2 leaders for the remaining ants, Jin-Woo cancelled her summoning. As he turned his attention back to his shadow soldiers, he noticed that they had begun collecting magic stones. He quickly ordered them to stop. These stones needed to be used to rebuild the island and compensate for the damage. He already had enough from Baru's corpse, and his priority was to eliminate the remaining ants. He wondered if his combat power alone would be enough to take care of all of them. At that moment, Baru spoke up.
Without a leader, the ants were scattered and unable to regroup into military units.
Jin-Woo nodded and asked how many enemies were left.
Before the battle began, there had been over 8,000 ants, but now only around 4,000 remained.
While Jin-Woo had already wiped out a significant portion, there was still enough left to pose a threat. He turned to Baru once again and asked if he could take care of them. Without hesitation, Baru responded,
"If that is the order, I will do it."
Meanwhile, on one of the hunter ships, the Korean hunters spotted a massive swarm of ants flying in their direction. The ship's cannons opened fire, and the magic users on board unleashed their spells in an attempt to hold them back. The hunters quickly realized that the ants were heading north straight towards their camp. It was now their turn to prepare for battle. As the swarm drew closer, one of the hunters declared that this was their chance to reclaim their honor. However, another hunter shouted at him to stay focused. Each ant was comparable in strength to a hunter, and recklessly charging in could lead to disaster. Determined to prove themselves, they all braced for the incoming assault. Yet, just as the ants reached the shoreline, something unexpected happened. A brilliant light suddenly appeared in the sky. and in an instant the ants were reduced to scattered remains. The hunters stood frozen, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. What kind of creature had just wiped out their enemies in the blink of an eye? For 2 days now, the remaining ants had been actively spreading destruction in the southern part of Korea. After that, reports surfaced that they had reached the coast of the China Sea, and soon enough, they had infiltrated China itself. On board a ship stationed in the region, the exhausted crew members, who had not been able to sleep for 2 days, discussed the dire situation. Among them, one man pointed out that the Second Legion had now entered the firing zone. One of the hunters, eager to showcase his strength, stepped forward. He saw the overwhelming number of ants and felt that there was no end in sight. With unwavering confidence, he drew his massive swords and declared that the ants should submit in peace, for the sea itself would be their grave. As he unleashed his skills, 2 colossal magical waves surged forward, obliterating all the incoming ants in an instant. Surveying the battlefield, the hunter mused that these ants were nothing more than insignificant creatures, but he knew that if the ant king that Jin-Woo had fought had still been alive, the situation would have been much more perilous. However, he understood that battles were meant to be fought and won. There was no room for hesitation. Meanwhile, across the ocean in America, a girl had arrived at a luxurious residence to meet a renowned hunter. She inquired whether he believed that Jin-Woo and Mr. Huang shared any similarities, suggesting that perhaps Jin-Woo killed Huang's brother. Thomas Andre, the master of the Scavenger Guild, leaned back with a smirk, admitting that meeting Jin-Woo wouldn't be easy now. However, his curiosity had been piqued. He was eager to meet this rising powerhouse. The girl then asked if Thomas intended to challenge Jin-Woo to a fight, but before answering, Thomas reminded her that he and Huang hadn't just known each other for a few days. As a member of the Scavenger Guild, Huang was considered his property, and Thomas never forgave anyone who dared to lay a hand on what was his, even if that meant going against the US government itself. Back on Jeju Island, the 3rd day of the raid had begun. The military and the main forces of the Knights Guild had landed to gather magic crystals and manage any remaining threats. As they walked along the shoreline, one of the hunters began reminiscing about a certain individual, someone who had spent his life chasing a dream but had almost never been lucky. This man had trained relentlessly, even undergoing extreme self-discipline to drop a weight class, all in pursuit of an Olympic gold medal. Yet, just as he was on the verge of achieving his dream, fate played a cruel trick on him. The night before his defining moment, he felt completely fine, well-rested, and ready to claim victory. However, he suddenly awakened magical powers, and with that, his Olympic aspirations were forever lost. Another hunter walking behind him quickly realized that he was talking about himself. Despite the bitter twist of fate, he had refused to give up. He had found a new dream: to create the strongest guild in South Korea. As they ventured deeper into the island, they stumbled upon a large cache of high-grade magic crystals. Their excitement grew, believing that collecting these treasures could elevate them to the top of the rankings. However, a Korean girl among them voiced her disapproval, saying that this wasn't right. Their conversation was abruptly cut short when they spotted a group of ants. They surveyed the area, noting that the battlefield had been thoroughly cleared and no traces of mana remained. Suddenly, one of the hunters noticed an ant hiding behind a collapsed wall. Wasting no time, he charged forward, cutting it down with his massive sword. He reassured his team that there might still be lingering threats. A strange figure was approaching them. The hunters immediately tensed. There was no reason for anyone to be on this island, except for the military and association members who had been assigned this mission. Their leader stepped forward, demanding that the man identify himself. He instructed his team not to open fire yet, as the figure didn't appear to be a monster. Instead, he issued a warning, telling the stranger that he was in a restricted area and should comply with their instructions. If he resisted, they would be forced to take action. However, the man responded in an unfamiliar, monstrous language. The hunters exchanged wary glances, realizing that this was no ordinary individual. Before they could react further, another figure beside the stranger casually snapped his fingers. In an instant, all the hunters collapsed, falling unconscious where they stood. One of the mysterious men turned to the other, questioning why he had used such a technique. The other shrugged, explaining that it wasn't anything serious. He had simply put them to sleep for a while. He then asked his companion if he had completed his inspection, to which the latter replied that he had, though he found something strange. As they discussed, one of them questioned why they were even bothering to help humans in the first place. The other admitted that he too found their reasoning unclear, almost as if there were cockroaches in his head that he didn't understand. Their attention then shifted to the corpses of the fallen ants, the sight of their rotting bodies making them sick. But soon, one of them refocused, stating that it was time to begin the hunt they had planned. Without further delay, man opened a portal before him and prepared to step through. However, his companion stopped him, mentioning that one of their targets was here in Korea. Since they were already in the vicinity, they might as well deal with him while they had the chance. Man dismissed the idea, suggesting that they leave the task to that person. As he moved to step into the portal, his companion called after him, expressing reluctance to get involved with that particular target. With a dismissive chuckle, the first man replied that he could think whatever he wanted. With that, the portal closed behind him, leaving the second man standing alone on the island. Glancing down at the unconscious hunters at his feet, he sneered. With a casual flick of his massive hand, another portal materialized before him. Without hesitation, he stepped through, disappearing without a trace. After the events of Jeju Island, Jin-Woo went to pay his respects to the fallen. Reporters took countless pictures as he stood solemnly before the memorial, honoring those who had died in the raid. It was his first major mission after becoming an S-rank hunter, and the whole world was buzzing with discussion. His actions, strength, and influence had cemented his name in the public consciousness. Everywhere, people were talking about Sung Jin-Woo. Although his actions were praised, he was unable to avoid criticism. People believed that the death toll could have been minimized if he had participated in the raid sooner. As he was leaving, he encountered Baek Yoon-ho, the head of the White Tiger Guild. Baek admitted that at first, he hadn't believed a single person could turn the tide of war. However, after witnessing Jin-Woo's power, he realized that one man could indeed make a difference. With gratitude and admiration, he told Jin-Woo to hold his head high. He had put an end to a tragedy that had claimed far too many lives. Baek Yoon-ho thanked him sincerely. Stepping away from the public eye, Jin-Woo's gaze met Cha Hai-in's. She quickly averted her eyes, a faint blush creeping onto her face. Jin-Woo, momentarily confused, didn't think much of it. However, when he later looked at the official reports of the raid, he was reminded of the cost of their victory. Out of the 4,800 participants, including hunters and ordinary awakened 64 hunters and 32 civilians had lost their lives. Compared to previous raids, this one had fewer casualties, but it was still a heavy loss. Shortly afterward, Jin-Woo sat down with the president of the Hunters Association. The conversation quickly turned to Jin-Woo's plans, and he revealed that he intended to start his own guild. The association president assured him that, as a high-ranked hunter, he wouldn't even need to go through the usual procedures. A single phone call to the association and they would handle everything for him. This made Jin-Woo curious. What other privileges did high-ranked hunters have? Their discussion was interrupted when the president brought up something unusual. A small group of hunters had recently gone to Jeju Island to exterminate the remaining ants and collect magic crystals. However, they were later found unconscious. Strangely, none of them could remember what had happened. These weren't just ordinary individuals, they were high-ranking hunters and members of the Knights Guild. The president asked Jin-Woo if he had placed any kind of barriers on the island, but Jin-Woo denied doing anything of the sort. Jin-Woo began to wonder if the fallen hunters had triggered some kind of trap left by the ants. But before he could dwell on it further, a man approached the association president and whispered something in his ear. The president turned to Jin-Woo and informed him that an unexpected guest had arrived, so he needed to step away. Jin-Woo thanked him for his time and left the office. As he approached his car, a man suddenly called out to him. The stranger apologized for the sudden approach and introduced himself as Adam White, a senior agent of the American Bureau of Hunters. He asked Jin-Woo to simply call him Adam. Jin-Woo found it strange if this man had been looking for him, why hadn't he visited his office directly? Could this be the foreigner that Jin-Ho had mentioned before? Curious but cautious, Jin-Woo asked Adam what he wanted. Adam explained that he had valuable information to share, something that no other country or organization could provide. When Jin-Woo asked why he, specifically, was being given this information, Adam smirked and replied that it was only for a select few who would benefit immensely. He then admitted that he had planned to meet Jin-Woo in person earlier, but the Jeju Island raid had taken priority. Now, even his deputy at the bureau wanted to meet Jin-Woo in person. Adam then casually mentioned something intriguing. Did Jin-Woo know about awakened individuals with the ability to enhance the strength and abilities of other awakened? Jin-Woo paused, processing the information. Was such a thing even possible? If true, it could be an enormous advantage. He decided to hear them out and agreed to go with them. Michael Connor, the deputy director of the American Hunters Bureau, he was eager to meet Jin-Woo, and Adam acted as their interpreter. Without wasting time, he got straight to the point, offering Jin-Woo immediate U.S. citizenship. Normally, immigration documents took 2 years to process, but if Jin-Woo agreed, he would become a U.S. citizen instantly. However, Jin-Woo wasn't interested in citizenship. He was here for the information Adam had promised. He pressed them about the awakening ability that could enhance others. With a knowing grin, Michael Connor gestured for someone to enter the room. Moments later, a woman walked in. Michael introduced her as Ms. Selner, the only person in the world capable of helping awakened hunters break through their limits. As Jin-Woo looked at Ms. Selner, he immediately sensed that her aura was different. She didn't feel like any of the awakened hunters he had encountered before. Something about her presence made him wary. Michael Connor stood up and motioned for her to begin. She turned to Jin-Woo and acknowledged that her ability was hard to believe. Many hunters had doubted her at first. However, she assured him that once he experienced her power, all doubts would disappear. She began to explain. Every awakened individual had a limit, a boundary they could never surpass. No hunter had ever been able to increase their rank after their initial awakening. But her power was different. She could help awakened hunters break free from their shackles. Her ability, which she called forced reawakening, operated in 3 stages. However, the process required an immense amount of magical energy, making it extremely rare. Only a select few could receive her gift. Jin-Woo thought deeply about her words. If she was telling the truth, then her power was incredibly valuable. He asked her just how effective it was. She replied that it depended on the individual, but the improvement was usually between 20% to 30%. Jin-Woo was stunned. If this were true, it would explain why so many hunters moved to America despite facing criticism. Any other hunter would kill to be in his position. Michael Connor confirmed her words. This was why the American government protected Ms. Selner, ensuring her safety and compensating her generously. The risks were high, but her ability allowed them to create stronger hunters, which in turn strengthened America's standing in the world. He then smiled and told Jin-Woo, "This ability is our gift to you." Jin-Woo, however, wasn't fooled. He smirked and replied, "A gift? No, this is a bargain, isn't it?" Michael chuckled but didn't deny it. If Jin-Woo became a US hunter, they would help him push beyond his limits. He would also have the freedom to join any guild he wanted. These were exceptional terms, and they weren't pressuring him to decide immediately. Today's meeting was merely an introduction. At that moment, Michael asked Jin-Woo if he wanted to try the forced reawakening process. He said it could be seen as a gesture of goodwill. Jin-Woo hesitated. Something about Ms. Selner's confidence unsettled him. Connor thought, once Jin-Woo experienced it, he wouldn't be able to stop himself and may sign the papers here and now. Still, his curiosity got the better of him. Ms. Selner gently took his hand and instructed him to look into her eyes. She began the first step of the process. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but suddenly her expression changed. She was no longer calm, her face twisted into horror. She gasped as her mind was suddenly pulled into the darkness. For a moment, she saw nothing but an endless abyss. And then, from the darkness, she saw Jin-Woo staring back at her. Her breath caught in her throat. But it wasn't just Jin-Woo looking at her. There was something else, something far beyond human comprehension. A presence so overwhelming that it crushed her very soul. Her body froze in terror, and then she screamed. In the real world, the sudden scream sent the room into chaos. The agents immediately pulled out their guns and aimed them at Jin-Woo. "What did you do to her?" one of them shouted. Michael Connor immediately snapped at them. "Put those away! Do you even know who you're pointing your guns at?" He scolded them, reminding them that if they acted so carelessly in front of someone like Thomas Andre or Liu Zhigang, they wouldn't even be left alive to regret it. Meanwhile, Ms. Selner was trembling, clutching her head as if she had just witnessed something unspeakable. Michael quickly approached her. "Are you okay? What happened?" She was sweating profusely, her face pale. Michael frowned. "You don't look well." Connor asked if they can reschedule the meeting, and he will be in touch with him. To which Jin-Woo agreed. Connor asked Adam to show Mr. Sung the way out. As he left the room, Ms. Selner whispered with trembling hands, "He is a king." Michael turned to her. "What?" She gulped. "He's incredibly powerful." Michael frowned. "As strong as a national-level hunter." But Ms. Selner shook her head. She said she wasn't sure if it was just that he had reached the national level of hunter, but he is not an ordinary one there. No doubt he was a king, but this young man was different from other hunters. The moment she looked inside him, a cold gaze pierced through her. But it wasn't the hunter Jin-Woo, an abyss, all-consuming abyss, surrounded his soul and was looking straight at her. And then she added something even more chilling. On top of that, his power has no limit. The president of the association sat in his office, reflecting on the tragic death of Hunter Min Byung-gu. Despite his retirement, Min's passing was devastating, and the president couldn't help but wonder why it had to be him. Though heartbroken, he knew there would be many more challenges ahead, and things would only grow more difficult. Suddenly, his phone vibrated, and upon answering, he was shocked to hear that a gateway to another dimension had appeared in the middle of the road. The president quickly decided to contact a major guild, realizing that if the gate had indeed appeared near the area, it might be connected to the location Hunter Jin-Woo had previously mentioned near his guild office. At that moment, Jin-Woo was sitting in his car, pondering what had startled Ms. Selner. She had seen something frightening, perhaps a real monster, and he wondered if they would ever meet again. As he sat in traffic, unable to understand why the jam was so severe, he received an incoming call from the president of the association. The president informed him that a high-ranking gate had opened in Jin-Woo's neighborhood, and he realized that the gate was likely causing the traffic delay. The president asked if Jin-Woo could handle the situation, but Jin-Woo, confident, asked if he needed permission to clear it. The president responded by asking where his sweep permit came from. Jin-Woo answered, "From the association," and the president, acknowledging his authority, replied, "Then who am I?" Jin-Woo smiled and reassured him that there was nothing to worry about. He would take care of everything. Not long after, Jin-Woo arrived at the gate. A cameraman from the news crew filming the event remarked that a gate had appeared in the middle of the road. As Jin-Woo approached, a girl from the association stopped him, questioning his purpose and whether he had permission to enter. She recognized him as Hunter Jin-Woo, and the onlookers in the cars nearby also noticed him. They figured he was there to handle the situation. The girl, still skeptical, asked if he had enough people for a raid. At that moment, Jin-Woo was on the phone with the president, and it became clear that the girl didn't realize who he was talking to. He handed the phone to her, and she nervously asked, "Who is it?" Jin-Woo replied, "Someone you can't ignore, it's the president of the association." Upon hearing this, the girl turned pale and immediately turned to let him through, but Jin-Woo had already walked into the portal. As she watched him step through, she hoped he would stumble or twist his ankle, but then something strange began to happen. The gate started to change color, turning red. The girl was stunned. She hoped the change wasn't because of something she had said, but Jin-Woo was already inside, and he realized he had been tricked. The gate was a red gate. He turned around, only to see that the entrance had closed, and he knew getting out would be difficult. However, he wasn't too worried. He remembered his mother telling him that if he reached such a high rank, he should use it to save people, just like his father, a firefighter who had always saved others. His mother had always supported him, and he felt a sense of relief, knowing she understood him. Determined to finish the job quickly, Jin-Woo began summoning all his shadow soldiers. Towering monsters, several meters tall, stood in front of him, and his soldiers engaged in fierce battle with them. Jin-Woo watched the battle unfold and reflected on the nature of a hunter. A hunter was born to hunt, and monsters weren't the only enemies. Hunters must always stay vigilant, as the situation can change in an instant. Many high-ranking hunters lose their guard and become complacent. But no matter the odds, a hunter will always come to the aid of their friends and family. A hunter's duty never ends. No hunter has ever considered stopping hunting, and Jin-Woo knew this was his path too.